Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. A while back, I got an encounter via email from a subscriber. It was a very intense encounter, and I got a couple of little emails after that. Since then, I have desperately tried to email this person and try to communicate with them. I want to know if they're okay. So tonight, I am going to share with you the encounter and emails that have stumped and baffled me since May of 2020. Before we get into this, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? In the first week of May this year, 2020, I had an encounter that I'm still having problems coming to terms with. Due to reasons I will explain in my story, I am not comfortable with giving my name or the details of exactly where this happened. I'm a pretty normal guy living in Delaware on the border of southeastern Pennsylvania. I am a lover of the outdoors, and in the past few years, I have not had the time to really get out into nature and get my much-needed dose of the natural world. In 2019, I opened my own online business, and due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic and the whole world being stuck at home on their computers, my sales tripled the first half of this year. I have 2 children who are now very responsible and trustworthy teenagers. My girlfriend works at a local hospital and is considered an essential worker. So the pandemic has kept her very busy this year. I turned 40 this year, and for the first time in my adult life, I had some time on my hands and was itching to get away from civilization. I have an internet hotspot router built into my SUV that works almost anywhere, no matter how remote. So with a laptop, I figured I could work from the road and take a few days to go fishing and breathe some fresh air. Neither of my teenagers were interested in joining me, and like I said, my girlfriend was far too busy with work. So I took my best friend with me, a 120-pound pit bull lab mix named Pete. He makes a great camping dog because he's incredibly lazy, and I never have to worry about him running off to chase deer or anything. He will lie on his blanket next to the fire all day and night unless I make him head out with me. But as I've learned while camping with Pete, if coyotes, bears, or any other predators come around, he snaps out of his laziness and protects the camp. Despite his easygoing demeanor, Pete is pretty intimidating, as he is a 120-pound muscle with no fat, which blows my mind because of how lazy and inactive he is. I try to go camping at least once a year, and when I do, I usually rough it with a small tent and whatever I can carry on my back. But this time I decided that I wanted to have as much comforts of home and really pamper myself. So I hitched my 10-foot enclosed cargo trailer to my very large SUV and filled it with all the things I would really want to be comfy. I brought my full-size backyard grill, a 12x12 pop-up canopy, an air mattress, 2 large coolers full of food, and a fancy 6-person tent. The campground I decided to go to is a large one that is mostly used by RV kind of crowd. But on the far end, right next to the best fishing area, they have a half dozen of just plain old campsites with no power or water hookups. My campsite was bordered by about 50 yards of thick woods that separated my camp from a large, fast-moving stream that is well known to be one of the best trout fishing spots in the whole state. On the other side of the stream is a steep mountainside that is covered in rock overhangs and small caves. It is a beautiful area, and I love to fall asleep to the sound of the water. I set up the camp so my SUV, trailer, and pop-up canopy make a sort of U-shape and block most of the view in my area from the rest of the campers. I rented my campsite for a full week, starting on Friday, May 1st, which was the first day that the state opened up the state parks and campgrounds to the public since the pandemic shut down. Back in March, I arrived at the campground about midday on Friday, and the place was packed. I spent most of the day getting my campsite set up, getting to know my temporary neighbors, and cooking ribeye steaks, burgers, and vegetables on the grill. The weather in central PA in early May is pretty much perfect, so I decided to sleep in the tent each night with Pete and turned my trailer into a mobile office where I kept my computer, internet goods, mailing packages, and even a printer for printing postage. This way I could work for an hour or so each morning, get my orders packed up, drive the 20 minutes into the nearest town once every few days to get my orders shipped out. I remember thinking that I wish I could convince my girlfriend and the kids to just sell everything and move into the woods to live just like this. The weekend was crazy busy at the campground, and the creek was lined with fishermen as far as the eye could see, so I decided to do some hiking and exploring into the surrounding wilderness with Pete, instead of fighting 10 people for the same one fish all day. It felt great to just get out to where I belong, the woods. The only negative was that it rained on and off all weekend while I was hiking. But to be honest, when you camp in PA, you should expect to get rain regularly. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 3rd, the campground cleared out fast, and by sundown there were only a few active campsites left. I'd gotten to know the two guys in the campsite directly next to mine, so we had hung out for a few hours a night, while I drank hot tea and they smoked joints like they were cigarettes. Needless to say, they were always hungry and seemed pleased to have me next door with my full-size grill and enough food to feed a small army. For the next few days, I worked online, fished the creek, and explored the mountains of the area on foot with my dog. We also liked to just walk the campground itself and stop and talk with the scattered campers who were there during the weekdays. On Tuesday afternoon, a few of them told me about a black bear who had made its way into the more accessible side of the campground and raided their camps the night before. This had me a little concerned because I had a full-size grill sitting out in the open at my camp that I had been cooking delicious food for days on end. I debated putting the grill inside my enclosed trailer at night, but laziness got the best of me and I left it out. Central PA has a rather large black bear population, and I was already aware of this. So at night I slept with a Mossberg Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun loaded with double-aught buck in the tent with Pete. And, just in case a rogue bear posed a danger to us, I had forgotten to pack a Ruger Redhawk 44 mag for hiking, so while out in the woods I had to rely on my S&W Shield 45 ACP that I already had on my hip when I left the house. It was not an ideal, but I figured it was better than nothing. On the night of Tuesday, May 5th, my new friends and I cooked up some BBQ, chicken thighs, baked beans, and baked some potatoes wrapped in aluminum foil on my fire pit. They produced a small bottle of vodka as well, and we made some orange soda spiked drinks to go with our fancy campsite meal. All the food and drinks combined with too much fun had worn us all out. So we parted ways and got ourselves prepared to crash for the night, a night that would prove to be the most terrifying night of our lives. At about 10 p.m., I loaded 4 shells of buck into my shotgun, got in the tent all squared away, and lied down in the tent with my dog next to me on his bed and blanket. I put some citizen journalist news on my phone and put one headphone in my right ear and kept my left ear clean to listen to my surroundings and to enjoy the sounds of nature. My tent was pitched close to a tree line with the rear of the tent facing the woods. The noise of the frogs, insects at night was super loud and is kind of a song that puts me to sleep better than any lullaby ever could. The next thing I remember is waking up and my eyes popping open with some kind of howl metallic noise outside of my campsite. I lie there perfectly still with my heart slamming from the quick spike of adrenaline that flooded my veins. Then bang! I heard the lid on my grill slam shut. I had stuck a fairly bright solar-powered motion light on the side of my trailer that lit up my small U-shaped courtyard area of vehicles and tents. My tent was facing the open part of the U, and I could see that my motion light was on and someone or something was moving around my camp, casting shadows as it went. I looked at Pete to my right, and he was still lying down, but his head was up and his eyes were as big as ping pong balls. He was clearly hearing what I was hearing, but I found it strange that he was silent. It was then that I noticed the usual deafening noise of frogs and insects in the woods behind me was not there. Then I heard whatever it was breathing. It was a hoarse, deep breathing that was when I thought to myself, bear. I could hear it walking around, thump, thump, thump. And next I heard it at my trailer, pulling at the side door, trying to get inside. So I sat up and grabbed my shotgun. One thing about black bears is that they are not the bravest animals, and any man-made noise will almost always make them run for their lives. So I racked the slide of my shotgun as loud as I could and chambered a shell. Instead of running off, the creature stopped moving and went silent. I could feel the fear building up inside of me as I pretty much held my breath and listened. To my horror, it started walking toward my tent. It was then that I saw its shadow take shape as it drew closer. It was on 2 feet and apparently huge. I sat there in terror and disbelief as it came right up to the front of my tent, breathing like a giant monster. I said out loud, "Whoever you are, I have a 12 gauge pointed right at you, so you better sound off who you are." Right then it leaned forward, right up to my tent and let out the most terrifying and deep growl I have ever heard in my life. At that moment, Pete whined softly and cowered his head down. It was then that the shadow of its head was clearly visible. It had the giant head of a wolf with 2 pointed ears. As it was growling at me, I could hear my neighbors talking to each other, and one of them shined a flashlight at the creature. When the light hit the side of the creature's face, I saw the eyes light up with a golden LED light. It turned its face toward the flashlight, and I could hear a man gasp and say, "Holy shit!" Then it turned its attention back to me and growled again. I decided right then and there that if I didn't do something, this thing was going to kill us. So I lied back onto my sleeping bag, took aim at the shadow of the monster's head, and pulled the trigger. What followed was complete and total pandemonium. The monster screamed and roared at the same time. It was like the death scream of a woman mixed with the roar of a big lion. Pete finally snapped out of his fear, jumped up, and started barking furiously. The thing ran off, and from what I could tell from the loud thump, it ran straight into my trailer. I clambered up and quickly unzipped my tent and poked my head outside to see. It got up onto its feet and then ran right into the picnic table and did a flip onto the ground. It started grabbing its face and thrashing around. I could see that there was blood everywhere on the trailer. I jumped out of the tent while chambering another shell. I aimed as best as I could with my whole body shaking violently. And right as it started to get up, again I shot it a second time. I'm not entirely sure that I hit it with the second shot. It stood straight up, and I pumped the gun and shot again. The third shot dropped it again. I was so terrified and taken back at how tall it was when it stood up that I tripped over my own feet and fell backwards. Just then I heard more gunfire erupt behind me and turned to see my neighbor unloading a large revolver into this werewolf-looking thing at maybe 20 yards. The creature was on its side and was kind of running in circles on the ground, gurgling and spraying blood from its face and neck as it was gasping. As it was doing this death spiral on the ground, it was moving closer to me, so I tried to pump the gun again and was shaking so bad that it took 3 attempts before the last shell chambered. I just pointed the shot without aiming and could see the hump on its back of its neck rip open and spray blood and flesh all over the place. I was really close at this point. The monster stopped flipping out and its limbs were twitching while its head remained fully animated as flopping back and forth for at least another 10 seconds. I crawled quickly backwards away from it and tried to stand up. I realized once I stood up that I had been holding my breath the whole time, and when I got to my feet, my vision started to go black and I fell over again. My new friend ran up and grabbed my arms and started pulling me hard backwards away from the monster. I stood up shaking badly and looked at the guy with the revolver. His eyes were huge and full of terror. When I started looking around, there was at least another 5 people showing up, all with the same wild-eyed expression. I saw that at least 3 of them had come over with their guns. People were yelling and asking each other what had happened and checking to see if I was injured because I had blood on my clothes and my face. It all happened so quickly, but as is often told by people facing traumatic events, it seemed like it was all slow motion to me. My dog was still barking and going crazy, so I did my best to calm him down. When I hugged him, he was shaking as much as I was. Before long, a small crowd had formed and people were on their phones calling 911. After a minute or so, a few guys and myself approached the thing. As it lay there, still occasionally twitching, we all stood over it, looking at it, saying, "What the fuck?" over and over. Eventually, we all started saying, "It's a werewolf," in disbelief. All at once, people all started taking pictures with their phones. Mine was still in the tent. The wolfman was dead. The top half of his head was basically gone, including both of his eyes and the top of his snout. I assumed that the first shot I made from the tent. The front of his neck was completely shredded, and the back of his neck was missing a large chunk of meat. Other than that, it was pretty much impossible to see exactly what the other injuries it had stained, as it was completely covered from head to toe in blood. But we were all pretty sure that it had taken buckshot or .357 magnums to the chest as well. There was a small river of blood running through the camp and right past my tent from the puddle that surrounded the beast. It was a lot of blood. It was on its side, and after a few minutes, we summoned the courage to grab some big sticks and flip it onto its back. It most definitely was a male, as it had a huge set of balls bigger than my fists. It was huge. We never measured it, but it was longer than any man I'd ever seen. It had a dog-like legs and weird-shaped paws with kind of small heel for feet. Looking back, I'm impressed it was able to balance such a big body on feet so small. It really had a skinny lower legs and pretty thick upper legs. It had arms pretty much like a human with long fingers that had filthy-looking claws, maybe 3 or 4 inches long. I noticed it was missing the top half of a finger from the battle. Then the second wave of terror hit us all at once. The howling of multiple animals sounded off in the direction of the mountain behind the creek. We all looked at each other, and I could see the same big-eyed look over everyone's face. I ran to my tent and clumsily loaded my shotgun with a full 5 rounds this time and grabbed my .45 as well and clipped it to my side inside my waistband. I also grabbed my phone. All of a sudden, everyone was done looking at the werewolf and was looking into the woods in the direction of the howling. It kept up for a few minutes, and we could hear the howling getting further and further away. The police, game warden, and paramedics showed up all at once. I could see from the flashing lights that they had blocked the entrance to the campground up the hill off in the distance. The cops were just as surprised and freaked out as we were when they first saw the creature. The two game wardens looked worried, not surprised. They told everyone not to take any pictures and made everyone clear the general area. The wardens were both on their phones almost the whole time from then on. The paramedics cleared everyone and tried to get me to agree to go to the hospital to get checked out, but I refused. The only injury I had was my hearing, as I was half deaf for a few days from all the gunfire and noise. The paramedics were also very silent and looked worried, much like the game wardens. The police took my shotgun and the revolver from the neighbor. They let me keep my .45. They made everyone else put their guns away, and anyone who was there was rounded up for questioning. Everyone was told to stay off of their phones, which was not much of a problem as only a few people's phones got signal at the campground. When I asked the game wardens what the hell that thing was, they told me they didn't know, but it looked like some kind of mutant bear or large canine. A few hours later, an SUV full of guys showed up. They were all carrying large Glocks and dressed in cargo pants and t-shirts. They immediately took me and the others who were inside aside and began questioning us. They told me that they were with the Federal Fish and Game, and they were very interested in the howling we had heard after the battle occurred. They must have asked me 10 times about where it was and how close it sounded and what it sounded like, etc. They also repeated to me 100 times that I was not to tell anyone what happened and that they would get to the bottom of things and find out what I had encountered. They told me to tell anyone who asked about my trailer that I had to shoot an aggressive black bear. I assumed they told my neighbor and everyone else who was on the scene to say the same thing. They made us open our phones and went through our photos and delete the pictures we took. They also told me if any of the pictures were to come out of the creature, that it would spell trouble for anyone who had them. They threatened me with all kinds of trouble if this got out. They did not try to pretend that I was seeing things. They just point blank and politely asked me not to talk about it, and to lie about the trailer damage. It would seem that I was asleep for only 2 hours before the Dogman showed up. By about 4 a.m., the officials had already gotten to everyone in the campground, and I assumed the other people were told that it was a bear, and made to pack up and get ready to go. They said it was not safe, and they had to close the campground until they were sure it was safe. After the Dogman was bagged and tagged, a small fire truck was brought in, and all the blood was hosed off of my trailer, vehicle, and the tables, and everything else, and the blood on the ground was hosed into the woods behind my tent. Then a few guys wiped down my trailer and vehicle with soapy water and hosed them off again. Regular old duct tape was put over the holes in my trailer, and they took my tent, bloody clothes, bloody slippers as evidence along with my shotgun. Right before I left, they gave it back to my shotgun, wiped down and unloaded. They told me to fill my tank at the closest town and drive straight home without stopping. They repeated this 3 times to me. Since all of this, I have learned everything I can about what I encountered. I listen to Dogman and Wolfman encounters day and night, and that is how I came across your channel. I figured I'd reach out to you. I am amazed that the authorities are able to keep such a noisy event with so many witnesses under wraps. I've been searching for anyone who came forward for anything about the campground closing in the news. I found nothing. I am not interested in putting myself out there any more than this. just for now. I'm almost as scared of the agents as I am of the Dogman, but all in all, they seem genuinely concerned for my well-being. He sent me this. I narrated it, put it out. I emailed him. I said, listen, when you're ready, I'd love to talk with you on the phone. We can do an interview or just have a chat. This is what I got in return. I trust that you're a good person and all, but I fear that they may be watching you due to other uploads of yours I have listened to about the dude named Victor. I find it interesting that one of the agents that really had me cornered for a while that night had a thick southern accent. I suppose he may have come from your friend's Virginia group. I will see if I can put together an online phone number and call you while on a proxy server. I'm sorry for being paranoid, but life has been going really well with the exception of this encounter. I'm terrified of those guys, agents, fucking with my life. I can't afford things going sideways for my family and I right now. My state of mind is pretty jumpy these days. I won't even take my trash cans out without my big revolver. If I do get the setup together, I'll call you. What's the best time? If you have any questions in the meantime, go ahead and email them to me. I will make sure to check this account each day. So I had him check out the comments. He checked out the comments. I sent him a couple questions, basically. Third email I got from the gentleman. I was reading through the comments on the show with my story. A few people had questions, it seems. No, none of the guys in the Denali had long guns, just large Glocks. I asked the older southern guy what kind it was. He said it was a Glock 20, 10mm. I really didn't give all that much detail in the description of the monster, looking back in my email to you. The dead Dogman smelled horrible, like a combination of barnyard animal mixed with strong dog piss. Also, it did have a tail, a small tail, maybe 2 feet at the longest. The Dogman was dark brown all over. Oddly enough, I do remember that it had some lighter brown strips on its arms, where the blood wasn't totally soaked in the upper arm area. It was fluffy fur, not the sparse, hairy thing I hear others talk about in their encounters. This one was fully covered in fur, like an actual dog, even its arms and legs. But when it stood up in front of me, it did seem to have some white in the middle of its chest. I could be wrong because I only saw it that way for a second. The next time I saw its chest, it was covered completely in blood. The skin on the tip of the snout and under its bottom jaw was both sheared off by the buckshot, but its teeth were undamaged. As it lay there, it had its mouth open, and its teeth were very weird. All of them were pointed and seemed like they would fit together like a shark's teeth or an alligator. The teeth were bloody but very visible. They seemed unnatural to me. My college major involved the study of teeth and fossils, so I have a good understanding of tooth structure and which type of teeth are designed for what. And it would seem that these teeth would only be useful for biting large chunks of flesh off and swallowed whole, like a shark or an alligator. They were not reminiscent of the normal canine teeth in any way. After listening to hundreds of encounters the past few months, a common theme is that they seem like they are softer inner organs of their prey, while often leaving meat behind. I wonder if it's because they swallow their food in large chunks, and obviously softer organs would be much easier in dealing with bone or tougher muscle. Just a thought. This is going to sound a bit silly, but I just have to say it. There was a feeling of something supernatural from the beginning. I can't describe it, but a feeling of something supernatural was even in the air, even when I thought it was a bear. It was like everything felt wrong, and reality had ceased to exist for 1 minute. How would every frog and insect for 100 yards know to be quiet? Why would a land animal like a dogman have teeth like an alligator? How did it keep flipping out and running around with its brains falling out of the top of its head? The very air around me felt like it had a weird charge. I feel like there's something important about these creatures that we just don't quite understand, something supernatural. Give me some time, and I will get a Skype number together this week or next week to give you a call. What is a good day and time for you usually? I said thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you for filling in the blanks. I gave him the best time. I said, anytime, my friend. Just feel free. This is the 4th email. I've been having weird things going on. Someone has been calling my phone from a different international phone number and hanging up on me after 10 seconds of silence. I can tell it's a landline by the noise it makes when they hung up. It also lets me know that it's an actual person and not a robocall. A black SUV with a guy who wears a headset with a microphone has been outside of my home in the early mornings. He leaves right before 6:30, right about the beginning of when rush hour starts. Yesterday, a white Range Rover pulled into my driveway in the middle of the day. I happened to be working in my kitchen when this happened, so I was facing the window when they showed up. I saw the 2 guys in the vehicle sitting there scanning my house and talking to each other. I always carry a gun now, even when I'm home alone with the kids. So I popped the button of my holster security strap and went out the front door and quickly opened it. The 2 guys looked at me and casually pulled out of my driveway. I did notice that they had an out-of-state license plate because it was just plain white. Definitely not Delaware. I'm sorry for this, Jeff, but I'm going to stop corresponding for a while. I can't help but notice that this stuff started happening after I contacted you. I could just be paranoid, but like I told you previously, I have a happy and almost perfect life right now. I have a lot to lose. I hope you understand. Feel free to let your listeners know. So, after serious searching, a white license plate is more likely going to be a government license plate, which they stated they were from the Fish and Wildlife, which would probably lead me to believe that the Pennsylvania Bureau of Investigation was involved. I did ask our friend, and he said he has no knowledge of anything like that happening. Once the Fish and Game got involved, then they got the Pennsylvania Bureau of Investigation involved. They kept the fucking lid on it because of why? Well, COVID just ceased for a little bit. Parks started opening. What they wanted to do was clean this mess up as fast as possible and open the parks back up. Tourism is a large profit-making thing for the state. I live in a very tourist area. There's numerous RV parks, campsites. Lake George, New York. Google it, the Adirondacks. The majority of the money in this area is made during the late spring all the way through early fall. Then from there on, the tourists go. It's like a dead zone. I really believe, just by talking to our friend Victor, that that's what it was. And he cannot find anything linking this to his group. He would know. The reason why I'm sharing this again is because this encounter and this gentleman I've been thinking about this since I got it. I got this email back in May. And I want I pray that he reaches out to me again, just so I know he's okay. I've made numerous comments about this, but I don't know what else to do anymore. I've emailed him a couple times. He hasn't responded. So, if this is you, please email me, because I just want to know that you're okay. I want to make sure that everything is cool and good with you. I'm afraid that possibly the Dogman may have followed you back to your environment or where you live now. Just a whole bunch of different things could have happened. And like Luke said back a while back, chances are those government agents are there to protect you. The could be Pennsylvania Bureau of Investigation are there to protect you, or are using you as bait to try to flush whatever else may have followed you into the open and get them. I just pray that neither of those things are true. I just hope that this has ended for you, and I really want to know if you're okay. So please just send me an email saying you're okay. Please. Have a great night, guys.